The finals is in a crisis. It doesn't have enough players. I believe that as a game, the finals is almost perfect, down to the last minute details. However, it is almost perfect, as everything is bound to come up with problems eventually. Now, when you start to assess the problems and really start taking a closer look, you'll start to notice that they are tied with the low player counts. Let me take a step back here for a minute. When the finals launched about 2 years ago, it was super hyped, achieving a peak player count of 243,000 players online at release. However, as Season 2 came around, the game had not retained more than 20% of its launch player base. This could be expected, as after a game's launch, a lot of problems come to the spotlight. With so many more players, the finals limits were tested. Very quickly, players saw the considerably ass performance of the final servers, which wasn't necessarily Embark's fault since the game wasn't yet ready for such a heavy strain, even for opening day, as it was still a small company after all. Well, not anymore. Secondly, there was not as much content when the game first dropped. The maps that came with the launch were all pretty similar. Obviously, for longtime players, you can tell the difference between Monaco, Seoul, and Skyway Stadium with literally a room in a building, as anyone with substantial experience knows the difference in gameplay and routes. But for someone who just wants to try the game out, the maps will look the same because of their similar color palettes. Lastly, a lot of people just found it imbalanced. Originally, when the game dropped, there were a bunch of gadgets, weapons, and specializations formed in hell, circling around in the gameplay loop. And at its worst, as much as people had fun with the nukes, they could literally team wipe within 5 seconds, removing any sense of skill. Coming back to Season 2 launch, Embark surely learned. I mean, Season 2 was a great season, I would say even amazing. It brought a new map, new modes, an awesome battle pass, literally all sorts of improvements, and it showed the amount of care that Embark was putting in the game. At this point, the finals had gotten its most stable player count of 20 to 25,000 players active. Most of the hype players left, and now they were keeping roughly 10% of their peak player count. And surely, after such a great season, Embark would cook something even better, something to shatter the online space once more, with their proposed Season 3. You already knew. This was the lowest their player counts had ever dropped. Season 3 launched with 30,000 people on launch day. 1 week later, they had less than half of that. This was one of the most shattering moments for the game. Despite how shit of a season Season 3 was, you know, adding Kyoto, add Spear, and Terminal Attack and all that, you get the point. The season had an insane impact on the finals. The player counts for the next year would have to be slowly built back from the ground up. Finally, by Season 8, they had regained all of these lost players, on launch day totaling 32,000 players. However, we are in Season 9 now, and on Season 9 launch day, we only have 21,000 players. What has happened, and why are these missing players going to hurt the game? When Season 8 launched, enough content was introduced, like the P90 and BFR Titan, and as a season, it was pretty strong. Why did the player count drop? Well, around this time, Arc Raiders, another one of Embark's games, was finally going public, and as Arc Raiders launched, we can see a direct correlation to player counts dropping. However, this isn't the whole story. As the finals got a larger player base, once more the problems were brought to the light again. One of the biggest ones was the ranked system. Ranked still sucked ass as a game mode, and kinda still does, but you could see my other video on that topic. In short, ranked feels like hitting a brick wall with snapped wrists. Additionally, even the queues were bad. Not even in ranked, the finals as a game, I would say, has not so great matchmaking, and I know this as a long-time player. What typically happens in a regular game is usually one team or even one player has an incomparable skill level to the rest of the lobby, and even as a pretty okay player myself, I'll join a quick cash game only to get 15 kills, 0 deaths, and have a higher player level than the rest of the lobby combined. This doesn't help me surely, because I'm not getting better, maybe except for the aim training, and the rest of the lobby has to deal with just stupid gameplay. This causes players to leave the game for unfair matchmaking. When I get placed against rubies in ranked as a plat player, you best believe I'm leaving the game. Another concern with the game for many is the economy of the game. A lot of players believe that the game started to gain too many microtransactions, and the main supporters of the game were the whales in the community. Now for reference, I have spent close to $200 on this freaking game, which is pretty sad. However, I had a strong belief in the longevity of this game, and that when times get bad, they can improve and adapt. Now getting back to the skin economy, there is kind of a question. Why do so many things involve money? Not for gameplay, but for cosmetics. However, then again, the costs are always being flashed on everyone's faces. One part of this problem might be account trading, as I know many people do. Buying accounts has become common in the modern day and era, yet I have a fix for the game. Firstly, make the game paid. And wait, hear me out, the game itself is great, but what can make it even better is fixing the hundreds of microtransactions and just overall spending view on the game and swap it to being paid. Not only would this remove the need for so many different kinds of microtransaction expenses, as we could just make the only thing for purchase to be the multi-bucks, and you could use your multi-bucks to buy all sorts of things, which would essentially be changing the cost from money to the cost of time. People would instead have more of an incentive to play the game, to see account growth and all of that, which would most definitely improve the game. Additionally, this would fix hacking problems and smurfers, as now there would be a greater cost, and additionally, Embark could earn back from it. Obviously, the rest of my gripes with the game aren't major, and to be fair to Embark, the game itself was in a pretty good state in Season 8, so the amount of players dipping was unfair to the game. But after all, they were all going to check out Arc Raiders, so they would surely come back eventually, right? Well, Season 9 drops and only has barely above 20,000 people playing, which is a lot less than Season 8, 32,000. And apart from the reasons of why this happened, this has a much worse effect than its cause. Missing players leads to all sorts of problems, mainly the fact that less players has an effect on the game, and it compounds, making even less players. For instance, the queues will only get worse with less people, because in a game with only 12,000 people online, who 10,000 of which are going to be in the ranks, this makes the chance that you get into an unfair ranked game much higher. Secondly, the fact that the queue gets worse also affects the game quality. For instance, Embark is going to put less resources into the game with less people. So obviously the fact that the game loses people makes Embark put less resources, so the game just gets worse over time, totaling the game's progress in the FPS genre. And the most important reason why having less players affects a game's performance is the bandwagon thinking. Newer players are less likely to try the game because they think the lower player counts mean that the game is bad. The game is not bad in my eyes. The game has not been bad since Season 3. The game is definitely worth having a high player count, but for some reason, a lot of people just shut it down. All in all, having a low player count is a problem that, if not resolved fast, takes an incredibly heavy toll. We saw that they were able to fix it in Season 3 with the start of Season 4. They increased their player percentage. So now, all they need to do is make an additional push, some balance changes, some serious improvements, and the game will be back up on its feet. I'm not a guy to stretch out videos, so I'll make the conclusion short and sweet. The finals doesn't deserve to have low player counts, but unfortunately that's where it is right now, and it's gonna have to escape this player pit if it wants to succeed. Maybe some more advertising, maybe some more balance changes, or shake it up and add a new gun or map halfway through Season 9. At the end of the day, if they don't fix this soon, it will forever poison the game. If you stayed till the end, please subscribe. My goal is 10,000 before 2027. And hey, if you really like my content, join my membership because it supports my dream. Anyway, I make these videos with love, and see you in the next one.